Well, welcome along to It's Only Rock and Roll. We love it. It's episode number 2. We had a brilliant first one to start things off. We're going through the different areas of rock music, rock and roll, pop music in terms of, well, production, stories of what's happened on the road, looking at artists, looking at managers, looking at production guys. And we started off with 2 production guys, Jake Duncan and Steve Martin, some fabulous tales from them, a massive amount of experience, 50 years or so, or 40 years each. And they've worked with people from an A to Z, I would say, from Aerosmith right through to ZZ Top and a multitude of stars in between. Today, a different aspect of rock and roll. So Russell, tell us who we got lined up.
Well, I'm quite excited to have my old friend Stan Urban, who's, it's fair to say, more than 6 decades in the rock and roll industry, and really rock and roll, where it all started. So he can give us an insight. I think both you and Phil, no disrespect to Stan, I think both you and I were probably in diapers when he was, or not even thought of when he got started. But native of Dundee, Stan, and Stan's a singer-songwriter, piano player, rock and roll piano player. Native of Dundee, but now lives in Denmark, but has performed around the globe, still performing. I don't think Stan would mind me saying he's 81 years old, or 81 years young, as I've experienced being with him recently when he came to visit me in the Philippines, and he's got lots of energy, still played a gig in the Philippines, and now we've invited him onto our podcast to just share a bit about his life, because our listeners don't know so much about him. All I would say is that I had 2 weeks with Stan, just in the house with us and hanging out, and we just laughed from beginning to end. I think it's fair to say, Stan. So welcome, mate. It's really good to have you on, and over to you, Phil.
Well, I understand, Stan, you've played with the likes of Chuck Berry through to Led Zeppelin, or hung out with Led Zeppelin. So we're going to find out more about that. And regularly at the Graceland's Elvis famous home. And there's a Danish connection with that, I believe, or German connection. So welcome to It's Only Rock and Roll. Russell said about your energy. Where do you get it from? I read somewhere that you have on stage the energy to light up a big city like New York. So where does that come from?
It's a little bit of an exaggeration. I don't know. I think it's because I am a rock and roller. I mean, I didn't get into rock and roll. It sort of got into me. I was there at the start. I was one of the British, the second generation rock and rollers, if you like. And we listened to Chuck Berry and Little Richard. He was the one that got me going. I'd never heard a black singer like that. I thought black singers were like Nat King Cole, or that was way above my head. But I saw a movie called Don't Knock the Rock, and there was Little Richard up on the screen wearing giant gabardine flags for trousers, and it was Tutti Frutti and Long Tall Sally. And to cut a long story short, we had an old piano at home, and that was it. I went home and I was playing Tutti Frutti, 2 fingers on each, and I'm still playing fingers on each hand, and it just started there. I was about 13, just turned 13, 1957.
Okay,
and that was it. A lot of groups started up, and everybody played guitar. Nobody played piano. So, lucky for me, they came up and they wanted a piano player, and that was it. I was in a group at just turned 14.
So with everyone looking at playing guitar and playing the guitar, you picked up the piano and you got those gigs which people weren't available to do, I suppose. But I want to go back. You said you were playing with 2 fingers at home. Yeah. What was the reaction from the folks at home when you came home and started playing rock and roll on their treasured piano?
Oh, they were against it. Well, my dad was a widower. You know, I lost my mum at a very young age, and he thought I could be a doctor or a lawyer. It's the old story, you know, and he meant the best. And rock and roll hit, and that was it. The school went out the window. That became everything to me. The music became everything. I don't know. It's pretty hard to understand somebody who wasn't there, the impact. There was nothing before it. You know, I was born during the war, and, it was Rosemary Clooney and 20 Tiny Fingers, and there was nothing until rock and roll. It was a revolution.
Yeah. So how did your career take off? What was your first professional gig, for example?
Well, I was in a band. I was in a group, and can I go on? The group played through a radio. The whole band played through a converted radio.
Sound system.
It was in a church hall, but before that, after I saw Little Richard in the movie, I used to get a newspaper on a Saturday afternoon, and I would watch where the weddings were. There'd be a wedding in St. Joseph's Church. There'd be a wedding in St. Andrew's Cathedral. And always next door, there was a little hall. So I used to time it, and I would simply walk in. All these halls had pianos. I think the Germans dropped them when they ran out of bombs, you know. There was always a piano, an upright piano glued to a wall someplace. I would simply walk in to a private wedding party, strip the piano down, move the stool far away. I would never sit on a stool because Little Richard, he played it standing up. And that's it. I'd go into Tutti Frutti and they'd pass the hat around. Everybody would be laughing. And I knew I had something there. I think it was the cheek, just the cheek of this kid coming in there and playing. So that's the first money I earned. It was actually on my own, playing Tutti Frutti at uninvited at weddings. But then a group invited me to join. So I was in a group from then on.
So just talking, Stan. Sorry, Phil. Just talking, Stan, about the piano. You couldn't have chosen in those early days a more difficult instrument to lug around, surely, because nowadays you have electronic pianos and all the like, but in those days it wasn't exactly the most user-friendly to be in a band, to be a piano player in a band, was it? You'd have to, okay, the church halls had them, but when you're doing gigs, there's not always a piano. How did you manage?
There was actually, Russell, there was a piano everywhere. If it was in a hall, they'd have a piano for classical concerts or whatever. There was always a piano there. I never loved the piano around, but I run into trouble with the hall keepers because I would always be stripping the piano down and doing things to it, ripping off bits of felt off the pedals, so they would make a noise when I flicked it with my foot. I always run into problems with the hall keepers. And I always used the microphone that was used for political speeches. That was always in the corner of a stage. And I would just throw it in the piano, close the lid. The band are playing through a radio, and I'm playing through 36 tiny little speakers on the roof. I don't know what it sounded like, but that was it. It was great. It was great fun.
So you had no investment in terms of, sorry, Ross, you had no investment in terms of musical instruments or a sound system. Brilliant.
Nothing. In fact,
because money must have been really tight.
Huh?
Money must have been incredibly tight. I mean, you weren't born with a silver spoon.
15 shillings. That was what we got for Perth sale every Monday night. 15 shillings. That's 75 pence.
Yeah.
In today's money, and it was great. I could buy a shirt and a pair of shoes for that then.
Can I just show you something? While Russell was talking, I went to my other side of the studio and picked up the sound system for you. A radio. Can you see this? Was it something like this you were playing through?
Wait a minute. Wait, I got my glasses on.
I don't think it's going through very clear. Oh, there we go.
There you go. Yeah.
A bit more light.
I didn't play that. I was playing on the 36 speakers on the roof. The band
were coming through. The band were coming through this, were they?
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the guys in the band I was in, he worked in an iron foundry, and he invented a steel guitar. It took 4 guys to lift it. No idea that the steel was on the finger. He thought the guitar was made of steel.
Brilliant.
It's
brilliant.
I made an organ out of a Hoover. You know the old Hoovers, stand-up Hoover, and it had a big bag on it.
Yeah.
I got a second-hand accordion, and I cut the accordion in half and fitted it on the top of this Hoover. So the Hoover was blowing through where the bellows used to be on the accordion. But the problem was the Hoover was louder than the accordion. But anyway, I had an organ. And the piano was in the hall.
Was your inspiration for that from your, what should we say, the national instrument of Scotland, the bagpipes?
Yeah.
I tried the chanter. You don't learn the bagpipes. You learn on the chanter. It's very difficult. Most instruments, you play a note when you press your fingers down. With the bagpipe, the note comes out when you lift your fingers up. So it was a mystery to me. No, the piano was my goodness. The pianist paid for everything, cars, houses. It's paid for everything. My whole life.
Yeah.
I love it.
Just going back, Stan. Like when you obviously you're in a band and you're touring around, and those early days, it was pretty rough and ready. You probably had a van with equipment and stuff in it. And I seem to remember a story you told me. It was a bit of a gruesome story, actually, about a fan, because you're starting to pick up fans then. And obviously, when you load out in the evening, and there's the girls there, and the guys, you're young guys, you love it, all the adoration and that, and people taking interest. And there was one story, a bit of a gruesome story, which maybe you can share, where you picked up an unwanted part of somebody's body.
Yeah. Well, I would be about 18 by then. I mean, the days of gate crashing weddings were over. I was actually in a group by then.
Yeah.
It was called the High Four, and there's two lies there already, because first we weren't high, that came later, and there was 5 of us. So that was called the High Four, and I was driving. It was a place called Peterhead, northeast of Scotland.
I know Peterhead,
and be hanging around when you're putting the amps in the car. I was driving. We drove off, and the girls would run after the van. Then I would stop. Then they would run after it again. And just before they caught up, I'd leave them in a cloud of black diesel fumes and drive off again. So this happened 2 or 3 times. Anyway, we drove off laughing. 3 hours later, we're in Dundee. Cold, 5 a.m, frost, and I was getting my amp out of the back of the van. And when I opened the doors, something slipped out of the handle. And in the dawn light, I picked it up, and it was a finger, a girl's finger, and it was bent. It was like that, and I was very surprised that it was so heavy. You think of fingers as being light. But it was heavy. God, it was weird. And I went round to the side of the van and told one of the other guys, I says, Dougie, look at this. And he just says, fuck off, Stanley. Closed the door and drove off. So I was left with my arm and a finger.
And you've always wondered where that girl was and how she explained to her children and grandchildren, Mummy, Grandma, where did you lose your finger?
It was Stan Urban.
Was garden. So it's probably still there. They'll find it in 1,000 years' time, and they'll try to find out why is there one finger here. Yeah,
some pretty amazing stories there. And let's move from your gate crashing of weddings, which is fabulous. I love that, to some of the iconic stars who've been associated with and worked with and played along with. So let's start with Chuck Berry. That must have been a pinch me moment. And what are your key recollections of that occasion?
Well, of course, I was knocked out. I would be in my 40s. I think I was in my 40s then. And it was in a big stadium in Denmark. I get to the stadium. I used to always drive 2 CVs. I drove my 2 CV next to this black Mercedes. And the promoter said, he's in the car there. Black windows, I couldn't see anything. Nobody can go near him. And I said, that's nonsense. I'm playing piano with him tonight. So I went over, knocked on the window. The window came down about 2 inches. And right enough, there he was. It was Chuck Berry. And I said, Mr. Berry, I'm Stan Urban. I'm really looking forward to playing piano for you tonight. Then the window went down. And the first thing I noticed was his legs. They went on forever. They just seemed to go on and on and on. And he couldn't have been nicer. He was very nice. I heard he was a bit volatile, but he couldn't have been nicer. And I thought, yeah, I know what I'm doing with the piano. And right enough, on stage, after about 5 minutes, we really connected. We connected.
Right.
After the show, he said, I want the little guy. And he pointed to me. So that was wonderful.
Really fantastic. That is...
Didn't you, Stan, once lend your piano to the great Jerry Lee Lewis as well, and he trashed it from all.
Yeah, I didn't lend it. He arrived to do a gig in Denmark, and there was no piano. So they forgot about the piano. So it's only a couple of hours before the gig, and they thought he uses the same type of piano I use, which was the big old electric grand pianos from Yamaha.
The CP,
CP9 on, and they knew where it was. It was in a warehouse, so they got it. They never asked me. They got it. He played it, and next day I tried to play it on a gig, and there was broken strings, and it was dreadful, Yeah, wow. I think he plays the whole gig with his foot on the sustain pedal.
Oh, okay.
So, that breaks strings because the strings are open all the time.
Yeah. And didn't you bump into the legendary James Brown as well at one stage?
Yeah, well, it was a handshake. That was about it, He turned up backstage. And a grunt, yeah. He went, yeah.
Okay. Well, from those icons of rock and roll, Stan, you're really much referred to as a global citizen, from your home in Scotland, Dundee, to various locations around the world. And at one point, you and your family spent quite a lot of time in Ibiza, both, I suppose, from a family perspective and also playing professional. So what took you there? And what were you doing in Ibiza?
It's a holiday. It was I believe it was 1967. I went on a holiday to Mallorca, and there was no airport yet in Ibiza. So we got a ferry boat over just to visit. And, just before catching the ferry back to Mallorca, I passed a place called La Reja Piano Bar. So I said to my wife, I want to go and see a piano player. I went in, the place was empty. There was a bored barman, Spanish guy, and a piano over in the corner. I said, "Where's your piano player?" He said, "He's sick." And I'm not very good at a Spanish accent, but he says, where do you come from? And I said, "Scotland." What do you do? And I said, "I'm a piano player." And he said, "Do you want to play?" My wife's pulling me out because she knows how I was. But anyway, we went over to this piano, stripped it down as usual, took the whole thing to pieces. And he had a mic stuck in it and started playing. Within 10 minutes, the bar was full.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so he said, "What are you doing next season?" I said, "Oh, I'm very busy." I was lying. I had nothing. But that's how it started. I started doing seasons 7 days a week for 7 months. I used one piano a year. I would get a new piano, and at the end of season, we had to get a new one for next year. And that's the way it was. Maximum 80 people in the place, facing the corner. These pianos were always, they took a lot of room up, so you would always push it in the corner. So most people saw me from the back or from the side.
Sure.
To this day, I can't face people over a piano. I have to play the sideways on, but that's it. My goodness.
What about the tuning? You had some strange tuning with knives or something?
Yeah, well, for a start, the piano would be stripped down totally. And I was literally sitting inside it. My feet were in the bottom part of the piano. And I wore boots. And the amplification was Berry piano mics. They were clamped onto the frame. So if I tapped my boot onto the bottom of the piano, it would come through the pickups. If I took the felt off the pedals, they would clatter. They would clatter onto the piano. So there was this cacophony of sound. And I haven't started playing yet, Drawing pins in the hammers. And these drawing pins would give a strange sound on the strings. Yeah, it was just a cacophony of sound. I had a microphone tied around my ankle as well. So when I hit the piano, I went thump, and it went through the Berry pickups and through the little PA. And there was a cable as well. It wasn't radio controlled then. There was a cable, so it would go thump, whew, thump, whew.
Brilliant.
But the pedals would be clattering. It was a cacophony of rhythm.
So I'd say you were a piano player plus avant-garde percussionist at the same time.
I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew. I mean, my left hand, that's the bass, the guitar, and the drums. there was no backing. There was only a piano, and they told me later. They told me later what I was doing, what I am doing on my left hand is impossible because I reversed the rhythm. The rhythm is like normally it would be donk, pink, donk, pink. Well, I would do pink, donk, pink, donk. So I've already reversed where the rhythm should be. And the right hand was about a quarter bar ahead of the left hand. So it's going pink, donk, which is bad enough. And then I'm stretching the rhythm on the right hand. There's this cacophony of battering and sounds and clattering and boom, whoosh, boom, whoosh, and all this clattering going on, drawing pins. And someplace in the middle, my voice is kind of bleeding through. I'm ahead of the beat, I'm behind the beat. The left hand's going pink, donk instead of donk, pink. The right hand is pulling the rhythm in the other direction. So I was literally stretching the rhythm all over the place. Now, people's ears are not perfect. So they just went with it. Nowadays, everything's perfect. But this was far from perfect. And it was great. The atmosphere, you can't really describe it. It was just 100% rhythm. And all I've got is 3 chords. Rock and roll is only 3 chords, you know. So to try and do something different with that, I don't know, it must have been different. And yeah, the knives, you're right, Russell. The knives, there was so much battering and thumping and moving and clattering going on that the little brass pins that held the hammer together would sometimes slip out. So the only way to get them back in while playing and going pink bonk instead of donk pink was with a kitchen knife. So it would slip them between the hammer and push the little pin back. All while I'm playing.
This is Stan, absolutely fabulous. Can you give us a little demonstration, a bit more stretching out of the dink donks you were doing on the piano, so we can have a bit of a music interlude here?
Piano here.
Yeah, don't show Stan a piano. I took him to a shopping mall in downtown Manila, and there was a piano, and immediately he got up on stage and started playing like a set. And in no time there was a crowd. You know, it's just Brilliant. You can't show a piano even now. And I think the only reason I managed to convince him to fly halfway around the world was because I do have got a baby grand piano in my house. So that was very entertaining every morning, wasn't it, Stan? We had a little show every day.
Yeah.
But you used to get quite a few free drinks in that bar, I believe, as well.
Well, the deal was between 9 and 12, I got a percentage of all the drinks that were sold. So if anybody said to the bar, give a drink to the pianist, you know. So I got the most expensive. They knew that I got the most expensive drink in the house, and it was called San Francisco cocktail. And this thing, it had fireworks in it and pink sugar and, I don't know, coconut ice cream, cherries, oranges, pineapples. It looked like a jungle. So the piano was covered in these San Francisco cocktails.
Excellent.
Or like Alexis Sale used to say, it looked like a glass of phlegm with a tree in it.
Oh. That's the one. That's only more elaborate, more colourful, you know.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And so it sounds like Ibiza was a fun time for you. Ibiza sounded like it was a fun time for you. Yeah. And
it was quite hard. I mean, sorry.
Sorry,
yeah, it was 7 days a week.
Was that where you met Led Zeppelin, wasn't it? They used to come on holiday and you met their families and everything.
Yeah. Well, in the old days, Ibiza really was a paradise. Then, well, they opened up a big airport, and it started getting a little bit, I don't know what the word is, a bit cheaper. You know, all the artists, all the poets, all the musicians, they kind of left, and it became the mass tourism, you know. And yeah, I'm jumping ahead, but that was when I decided to leave. But yeah, I could always tell there was a band in the corner. I knew they were a band because they had long hair. And they sent up the San Francisco cocktails, and they would send up requests for obscure rock and roll stuff like Larry Williams and things like that. So during the break, I went down and I says, "You're a group, right?" And they said, "Yeah." I says, "Because only a group would know these obscure numbers." And I went and played another set, more San Francisco cocktails. And later on, I said, "What's the name of your band then?" And it's Led Zeppelin.
What?
And you
Brilliant.
didn't know who they were.
I didn't know who it was. And I've always admired Robert Plant for that, because if it was me, I'd walk into a bar and say, "I'm Led Zeppelin." They didn't. But they all laughed. And I got friendly with Robert and Maureen, his wife, then, and two little girls. I had two little girls. And it was just after they had a bad car crash, I believe. Maureen still had a pin in her ankle. But then they came up to my flat later, and we got very friendly. And of course, we jammed together. He would Summertime Blues, I think Bye Bye Johnny, Chuck Berry numbers. He always liked to come up and sing. So there was just me and Robert Plant.
I think he still does, you know. I've seen stuff on YouTube where he still does. He just turns up and, yeah, Robert Plant. Yeah, yeah.
100% musician. Later on, after we played together up in the flat, I said to him, I know you know what I'm talking about, Robert, but what was the number that you heard and you knew that you would never ever be the same again? And he says, "You tell me yours first, and then I'll tell you mine." So I said, for me, it was Long Tall Sally, Little Richard, and for Robert Plant, it was Weekend, Eddie Cochran.
Wow.
So Eddie Cochran was touring Britain at the time, and well, like loads of people, this is a real live rock and roller. We'd never seen them live before. So it was Gene Vincent and Eddie Cochran. They were touring Britain at the time. So, like many others, Robert Plant saw Eddie Cochran, and that was it. That's the number that got him started, and that's from the man himself. He told me that himself.
That's a real nugget of information. Fabulous. And to hear that, brilliant. So Ibiza was an important time for you, and also in a different part of Europe, Hamburg, Germany, so on, East Germany. When did that fit into your career?
Well, the early 60s, 61, 62, rock and roll was finished in Britain. It was over, I think, in 59. Buddy Holly was dead. Elvis was in the army. Little Richard was in the church. Chuck Berry was in jail. It was all over. And it was numbers like Rubber Ball, I Keep Bouncing. It was all these silly Fabian, Bobby V. It was over.
Yeah.
And then, to my mind, there was a dreadful trad jazz revival going on at the time. Ackerbilk, Kenny Ball, people like that. So it was all over. But there was a renaissance going on in Germany, namely Hamburg, the Star Club, Berlin, there was a Star Club, Cologne, Stuttgart. Yeah, rock and roll was still going there. So yeah, I joined a band and I went there. A Bristol band I was with called Johnny Carr and the Cadillacs. So that's when I went over to Germany, and it was all happening there. A guy called Tony Sheridan, he was being backed by a Liverpool band called the Beatles at the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Stuart Sutcliffe, he was playing bass. Paul McCartney was playing piano. It wasn't the Beatles as we knew them. Ringo was with another band. I believe it was
Rory Storm and the Hurricanes.
Hurricanes, that's right. He was with them, and well, it was just more great times. And oh my goodness, the people in these clubs, they used to feed the bands Preludines. They were pills, and we didn't know what they were, but you didn't get hungry, and that's what they wanted, and you could play all night. So they got all these young guys hooked on what we call speed now, and it was pretty dreadful. You wondered why you felt so bad in the morning, Yeah.
Mm.
But you certainly learn your rock and roll craft in these clubs. Yeah.
Hard times, I guess. A lot of playing, a lot of hours involved.
I didn't mean to go off in this tangent, but yeah, that's how.
I mean, it's just no secret, Stan. You obviously you have a German wife, the lovely Evie, and you spent a lot of time in Germany. And what I found really interesting talking to you previously is that you spent a lot of time in East Germany. And if people don't realize, when Germany was segregated, there was a thing called the corridor that you had to drive through to get to East Germany. And East Germany and West Germany was divided by this great wall. I've been there. I don't know if you've been there, Phil, but Berlin was quite an interesting place, because I felt when I went there, people lived as if there was no tomorrow. They didn't know whether the Russians were going to come over the wall or come through the wall or whatever. There was this feeling of, you know what, we don't know what tomorrow holds, so we're just going to have a party today. Is that fair? That was my feeling when I went there, but you were there right at the beginning, and you actually became quite a big star in East Germany, and we're on TV and everything. Can you maybe just relay a bit of what went on there?
Yeah, I have to go back. I was playing in, I believe it was 1964, in the Star Club Berlin. There was also a Star Club Berlin, and I got friendly with a chap in East Berlin who was at the very first rock and roll concert in Germany. It was Bill Haley and the Comets, 1955, yep. And it was a riot. After 20 minutes, everything was destroyed. The piano was pushed off stage. It was a riot, and it was filmed. And I think that's why rock and roll got a bad name, because of this particular concert. Anyway, many years later, I met this chap, and I used to go over to the East, and he had his wife. He had two little girls, two daughters. No, he had a daughter and a son. And many years later, his daughter is Evie.
Yeah,
I met her many years later. I'm jumping ahead there. What was the question again? Oh yeah, about the East. Yeah, and well, later on, I got invited to play there. I think because rock and roll was a working class music. It was socialism. It was,
yeah,
and we asked questions about the impact of rock and roll in the 50s here in Britain. So I was kind of accepted. Yeah, I was running down silver stairs and things like that on TV on a Saturday night.
Can you? There is one episode where, I mean, it back in the day. I know it's not really appropriate now for you, but back in the day, it was well known and in legendary status that you did enjoy a bit of the wacky backy, and as most artists did. And wasn't there a situation in backstage? You were in the dressing room, ready to go on with your tour manager or sound guy, and you were having a little relaxing puff, and something happened.
As usual, I picked this up in Ibiza. This is where where it all started. I'm prepared to go on TV there, and it was a live stage. It was in a city called Gera. And it was in a hall where Hitler made one of his famous speeches, actually. So anyway, it was backstage there. It was a library type place. And just like the movies, this whole row of books opened up. Like you used to get in the horror movies, like a secret panel opened up. And this guy walked in and he said, "Hier wird nicht geraucht." And he disappeared back into the library and closed the books again. So they must have been observing me, And thankfully, he didn't know it was wacky backy. You weren't allowed to smoke in the backstage area, and that was it. But my sound guy and me, we nearly had that. He just appeared from the wall. Hier wird nicht geraucht, and then he went back into the wall again.
That's cool.
And then I went on stage. They used to use me as a kind of straight man for jokes. There were some jokes that I brought a plague of ladybirds from the West over. But people on the bikes, they were like bullets. They were riding in on bikes and these clouds of ladybirds. And so everybody laughed. They kind of used me as I wasn't nasty, but they were just kind of vaguely political jokes, And then I would do Good Golly Miss Molly, and everything was okay.
So you were very much a political fall guy by the sound of it. So that didn't destroy your career, because you were a big star in East Germany. What was the starting point for that?
I was on a show called Schokolade. And that was a big Saturday night show. Yeah. And then the wall came down and that was it. Career over.
Yeah.
Oh, oh no. Yeah, I had
So,
to go to East Germany and Berlin, of course, just after the wall came down. It was fabulous, really, really good, real buzz, and
yeah.
yeah, good to see.
She was dancing on the top of the champagne bottles. She was one of them that was dancing on the top of the wall because Evie came from East Berlin.
That's your wife, yeah?
Yeah.
On the wall, dancing on top of the wall.
Dancing on top of the wall with
Brilliant.
a champagne bottle.
Yeah, great.
I've got a big lump of the wall. It's on the mantelpiece in Denmark.
Not to. So, Stan, you moved from Berlin and where you live now, Denmark, which is quite, for other people on the outside, it's quite a strange move, really. But you're actually very well known in that area, aren't you? And do a lot of gigs. You work a lot. Still, you're working a hell of a lot. How did that sort of come about? And obviously, you found a second home in Denmark.
Well, it was somebody made a tape of me in Ibiza and sent it across, and an impresario there thought, "Oh, this is a bit different." So I did, I think, 6 gigs. I was getting disillusioned with Ibiza by then. I didn't like the keyboard players started coming in, and with one finger you could get a whole orchestra on the keyboard and drums and all that. I kind of didn't like that. I liked the music more organic, you know. So I was getting a little bit fed up with playing in Ibiza, although I was still living there. And then I went and did a tour in Denmark, and it was popular. And did another one, and another one, and another one. And eventually I thought, well, I might as well move there. So that's how I moved to Denmark in 1984 it was.
There is a story, if I could just probably going back to this thing of being a bit of a legendary weed partaker back in the day. You were invited, all expenses paid, you and Evie, I believe, to some stoners convention in southern Spain, where they wanted you to come and play. Can you explain that? It's quite bizarre and actually quite funny.
Well, it was legal. It was above board by then. You know, if you were a member of a club, I believe, it was quite legal. And by then, cannabis was being used for medicinal purposes. It lost this kind of junky image. You know, people were starting to realize it isn't all that bad. But anyway, yeah, they invited me to do a gig there, and I arrived at the gig. There was no piano. They forgot the piano. That was part of the deal. They would
All
get
stoned.
they're all, yeah, exactly. So I got there, no piano. I said, never mind, do you want to be a judge? I said, okay. So I became a judge, and I was judging the different flavors of marijuana from all over Spain. I think I had 5 joints in my hand at the one time. They didn't call me Afghanistan for nothing.
Brilliant. Afghanistan.
But all expenses paid, 2 flights, hotel, and they forgot the piano. I mean, it's just you couldn't make it up. You couldn't make it up, could you? Really?
It was great. It was great. But yeah, these days have gone by now. I don't do that anymore. When
you got to 80, you told me.
Yeah, I realise I'm out of puberty now, you know, so I decided to hang up on that. But I must stress that I've never got into anything else apart from these early days in Germany. They would feed us these pills. I never got into anything else, and there was all sorts of funny stuff going around, especially in Ibiza, you know. And I saw these drugs ruin people, you know, cocaine and things like that. It wasn't very smart. And I thought, well, at least with a wacky backy, you love everybody. It's not a violent thing. It's a very mild and kind of. That was for me. I mean, if you're a bus driver, don't use it. You know, if you're a doctor, don't use it. But I thought I'm a musician, and it was okay. You know, poets, people like that, they've used it for hundreds of years. Anyway, that was my excuse. So that was my thing. That's all I ever. I never got into alcohol or anything else. You know, just that. But now I'm completely clean, and I'm just exactly the same.
Yeah, you know, full of energy as well by what we're seeing at the moment. So, great recollections of your career. So many funny stories. That's got you smiling. And let's come up to recent times. I mean, you're in Dundee at the moment, and there's an interesting story of many years ago where you were filmed, and it went viral on YouTube. You were filmed playing at Dundee Station, and that led you on to sort of doing, bizarrely, a duet with Tom Jones. Tell us about
I
that.
did- There's nothing new. Somebody said there's a station, there's a piano in a station stand, and I was on my way to the gig. I do a gig every year here. I was on the way to the gig, so I popped into the station, and as is my wont, I just started playing a few numbers, and people, were missing trains and everything. It was good. Did the usual thing and dancing and let me hear you say yeah and hail hail rock and roll, and that was it. By the time I got to the gig, there was about 18,000 clicks. It just kind of took off, which was great. And I think that led to The Voice. Somebody from ITV calling me and we want you to come and do an audition. And I said, I don't do auditions.
You
At
play the
this
piano,
age,
you don't sing.
but that's how it started. I'm sure it came through the station. They must have seen this going viral and well, we'll get him. And I says, no, I'm not doing it because I thought they would be using me as a kind of, oh, the fact. Isn't he cute? But the producer says, no, you're definitely not. Oh, so that's how the whole thing started. I said, okay, I got curious and I did it, and I kind of clicked with Tom Jones because I've always admired him,
Yeah.
and I told him that in front of all these people in the audience. I said that he was rock and roll, is rock and roll, and always will be rock and roll, even though he sings ballads most of the time. So we kind of clicked, and I met him on a few occasions. I was there, and yeah, yeah, he's one of my kind of a role model, if you like. I mean, he taught Elvis how to go back on stage again after doing these dreadful movies. Now,
Right.
that's not
Yeah,
bad for a coal miner.
that's good,
It's
isn't
not,
it?
yeah, yeah.
I
So
haven't got
yeah,
I haven't got the Tom Jones accent, but we were born probably about 20 miles away apart.
all right.
Several years
Okay.
apart, but distance-wise, yeah. I remember doing an interview with him, and I said, "How did you get involved?" He said, "Well, I'm invited up to London. It's a long schlep from the valleys."
Oh,
That's what
you
it
got
was. I've done a few shows with Tom Jones across the Middle East and places. So
yeah. That's great.
yeah,
Okay, it is a small world, really. The rock and roll world. It really is quite small.
yeah, yeah.
There you go.
Didn't American Idol also, after that performance on The Voice, didn't American Idol come after you as well?
Yeah. Well, I couldn't do it anyway because I'd signed some sort of contract. I couldn't do anything within several months of doing The Voice. This program was too similar. But I didn't want to do it anyway. Well, I tried it. You know,
Yeah,
in a strange way, I thought I was compromising my music a little.
yeah,
Y-
yeah.
Um,
Because they had a lot of control over you, didn't they?
yeah,
They had
the songs, they're all caught up. They told me what songs I could do. I think I've written quite good rock and roll songs. And it's not that easy to write rock and roll because if you get too clever, it's not rock and roll anymore. And if it's not clever enough, it's a cross between Johnny B. Good and a whole lot of shaking. It's not that easy to write rock and roll. But I think I did one called "The Devil Made the Boogie," but they wouldn't let me do it. They actually told me what songs I could sing. So there were these kind of cliches, the usual Chuck Berry numbers.
and
So
also you're known as a piano player. Not no disrespect, but you're not known as a singer. You're known as a piano player who sings.
yeah, I've never regarded myself as a very good singer. Although
So the voice was
Sonny
a strange.
just said I was a good singer, and we lost Sonny Curtis just
I
about 10
know.
days.
Yeah.
Uh, and he encouraged me like that. He says, no, you're a good singer. I never regarded myself as a good singer. It was always the piano, the piano, the piano. But yeah, to go back to that, I tried that. I mean, I didn't want to do the American Idol. Britain's Got Talent contacted me as well.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, no, I've tried that, and it was a lot of fun, and it was great. But no, it's really not for me.
Yeah, that ship sailed. Just to move on a bit, Stan, if you don't mind. I must mention, to me personally, the hilarious times we shared touring the Middle East. And I think it's funny because it's sort of like being a professional sportsman in a team, or a professional musician working with professional musicians. You have acquaintances, and some of those acquaintances you you like the person or you don't like the person, you click with the person or you don't, but they're acquaintances because in no time at all, you've done that gig or that tour and you move on and you're working with another artist, but it always sticks in your mind. With us, it was many, many years later when you came and stayed with me for a couple of weeks that we were able to actually spend time and really sit down and get to know each other really well. But back in the day, I mean, I booked you for 13, I don't know if you remember, 13 consecutive New Year's Eves in Bahrain at the Diplomat Hotel. You were actually a real cult hero in that town. You used to play New Year's Eve for 3 hours. Carnage, absolute carnage, just on your own, your piano, tapping your foot, miking up the stage so everyone could hear your foot tapping away, crazy, crazy times. But we went to Saudi together. We went all over the place together. We had some great laughs, and I do remember that with fondness. I mean, what are your memories of the Middle East? Because it is a strange one, isn't it? That you will actually, you created this big fan base in Bahrain, of all places.
Yeah, I remember the first one. I was disappointed because I'd meet all these bands, Marmalade, Swinging Blue Jeans, all these 60s bands. I'd meet them in Heathrow and we'd travel down. I thought, this is great because I'm so used to playing on my own. I'm going to be on this stage with all these 60s bands. And when we got there the first time, the guy says, no, Stan, your sound check isn't in the big hall. It's in the foyer.
The lobby, yeah.
Oh, no, I'm going to be one of these tinkling the piano and they're sitting around there with their champagne and can you play this, can you play that? But it wasn't. The foyer, I believe it held about 850 people. And that became the focal point because once the bands had finished in the big room, they would all go to the foyer and jam with me. That's how I got to know all these bands.
Brilliant.
I mean, I believe on The Voice I said I played with all these bands and people thought, oh, he was never in the Trogs. He was never in the Swinging Blue Jeans. He was never in the Fortunes. No, but I jammed with them all. That's what I meant.
And so the Swinging Blue Jeans, great bands. Swinging Blue Jeans, guys, yeah.
They played in Denmark once. And of course, when they were over in Denmark, I would connect with them all and I would say, when's your sound check? And I remember the Jeans, they said, oh, we had a sound check in 1962.
That's about right as well. That's about right.
Brilliant.
I just plugged in and it was, for goodness sake, and it'd be away. Yeah. A lot of these people are gone now. I got on well with Dave, the drummer from the Tremolos. Silence is Golden. And Dave was good. Dave was really good. He's gone. A lot of these guys are gone now,
Great guys. I did a thing with the Tremolos, and I remember Chip Hawkes. They were going on stage and I put a sign in felt tip I'd written on their dressing room, Tremolos, and as he was coming out with his guitar and like go on stage, he tapped on the sign. He said, oh, by the way, we're the Tremolos, not the Tremolos. I'd not put the E.
Tremolos.
Embarrassing. Said, oh, by the way, but it was all in good fun. It was not like, they didn't take themselves too seriously. But you mentioned the old rock and rollers, and you mentioned Bobby V, Rubber Ball. I worked with Bobby V on the Rock and Roll Revival tour. Yeah,
it was very good. That show that Buddy Holly missed. I mean, how heartless could you get? They lost Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, and Richie Valens, and next day they had to go and do another gig. The bands got Bobby V actually stood in for Buddy Holly, and I like Bobby V. I don't know why, but he was also slung in with all these kind of pop singers that came after.
On that bill I did, there was Frankie Ford.
Oh yeah,
you remember? It was Del Shannon. Yeah, Del Shannon, Runaway. There was the Marvelettes. There was Ricky Nelson, Bo Diddley, and Bobby V, and there were some of the Crickets.
Yeah.
And I can't remember because I know you obviously with Sonny, who sadly just passed away. You know, but yeah. So that was my sort of little bit of rock and roll. They did a revival tour of the UK, and I tour managed that. Yeah, so that was a lot of fun.
That's some lineup.
What a lineup! Yeah, promoted by American guy called Richard Nader. I seem to remember.
Yeah,
yeah.
I want to go back to Bahrain and the Diplomat Hotel, because I know that hotel, and it's conjuring up memories of you saying you caused mayhem there, because my recollection of the Diplomat Hotel in Bahrain is a bit of a staid, oldest hotel. So you causing mayhem, so it's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
No, they used to lock the doors, didn't they, Stan? They'd put bottles of whiskey, gin, you paid your whatever it was, and everything was in, and they put literally bottles of spirits on the tables. They locked the doors, and it was like, all bets are off. Let's go for it.
And
people were mad.
No doubt, a lot of the audience came over the causeway from Saudi Arabia for New Year's Eve.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. They didn't go back in a hurry, but they came quickly. Yeah.
But it was really strange.
Yeah.
I used to get this very sad, nostalgic, wistful feeling, because I was the only one who wasn't in the room at Happy New Year time when the balloons went up.
Yes.
I came on about 15 minutes afterwards, and I used to go through the kitchen, and I would come on then. But I'd be up in this suite, all this opulence, and I'd be standing there and looking out, and there's all these fireworks, and I felt a wee bit lonely. It was a funny feeling, And then I'd go in there, and then it would the whole blast would just hit me with the balloons, and that was it. Away we went.
That's brilliant, brilliant. So some fabulous recollections. And Stan, you're touring. We've been talking about touring. You're touring Scotland at the moment, and I want to let our listeners know about your sort of activities in terms of gigs. You do a lot in Europe, UK, Scotland at the moment, also the Philippines. So if you want to have a look at where Stan is and try and catch him, check out his website regarding his events, and so much we've been talking about it there as well. So what is your website? Give us your website URL, or just do a search, Stan Urban. Yeah,
stanurban.uk or stanurban.dk for Denmark. It's the same thing.
Okay, right. Yeah. So
I'm not very good with technology, I'm afraid, but I've got a pal here in Scotland that keeps me right, a guy called Mick McCluskey.
Yeah, well, I found it all right. I've got you behind me on the screen there. You see, that's your website up there. So Stan Urban, do a Google search, you'll find that. So brilliant talking to you. I think we've only just sort of scratched the surface of your career, very extensive career. Amazing stories there. So thank you very much indeed for joining us here on It's Only Rock and Roll, and we'll look forward to the reaction from our listeners and viewers, because this will be on YouTube as well. So Stan, thanks. Russell, over to you, mate.
Thank you. It's great you're allowing me to recollect these things. So thanks very much.
Pleasure. Great privilege for us to be on board.
You're obviously in Scotland at the moment, and you've written and recorded, and I think in Scotland recently you just recorded some music. You told me you're in the studio a few days ago or whatever, but hopefully we will be able to maybe play a section of some of your tracks, because you don't care about copyright and stuff, do you? With your stuff, you own everything. So I think we'll interject, Phil, some of Stan's music into this podcast.
We will, because we love it. We love it. Rock and roll. We love it.
People can get a feel for it. But thanks a lot, Stan. I really appreciate your time. We're going to catch up soon. I think you're going to visit us again. Come and play in my old my old friend's jazz club. Talking about playing in discos, you played in my jazz club down in downtown Manila, and Stan was really upset because the owner said, "Oh, he can play 45 minutes." I said, "Sure." Anyway, he played an hour, and then he said, "Oh, so frustrating." He said, "If I had another 15 minutes, I'd have had them on the tables," which I think you would have, Stan. And fantastic. Let's do that again sometime.
Nelson, you say hello to Nelson.
I will, yeah.
To play there.
Yeah.
Oh, guys, Thank you very much indeed. And we've come to the end of another podcast featuring Stan Urban. Next up, we'll be chatting with a singer, songwriter, and frontman for the biggest and most iconic band from India, largest iconic band in the last 40 years. So, the only Indian band to go truly international. Spill the beans. Who are they?
Yeah, Indus Creed, who I had the fortune of managing for quite a few years back in the day. They won an MTV award, went to Hollywood, got their MTV award for Best International Video with all the big stars. And Uday is the frontman for, and they've, like a lot of these bands that are around for a long time, they reformed, and they're probably doing better business than they ever did. And they've played and supported a lot of big international artists around the world. And we're just going to talk to Uday, who's a very interesting character. Going to talk about the old days. Obviously, it's not so easy touring India, and there's lots of funny things that occurrences that happened with them during those days. And what the scene's like, because you never really think of India as a music scene, but there really is a scene there, like there probably is in most countries. And Uday's the guy. He's the go-to guy to talk to because he knows what's going on. He's got his finger on the pulse, and he's involved in a lot of very interesting projects. So we'll be talking to him, and that will be episode 3. And we've got 4 and 5 coming up, which will be some other interesting things like concert promoters and artist management. So thanks a lot for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Another insight. Thanks again to Stan. Thanks, Phil.
It's only rock and roll.
A Phil Blizzard radio production.
Available on Apple, Amazon, Angami, Spotify, Deezer, Google, and all good podcast channels, and also now on YouTube. And if you would like to have a podcast production for your organisation, do get in touch with me. Drop me an email, philblizzardmedia@gmail.com.
A Phil Blizzard radio production.